Hi everyone, it's Hannah from Hand Done Crochet, and today we are making this beautiful sweater scarf together. Now sweater scarves are really popular at the moment, and I can see why. They're really comfy and they're really elegant and flattering. They are literally just a great big long scarf that wraps around your body, and we put some sleeves on the end of it so that you can put your arms in your sleeves. It's a really versatile piece to both make and to wear. And with that in mind, this pink version is one that I made many years ago, and it's still a very popular pattern, but it's never had a video to accompany it. So whilst I was doing a video for this, I thought, I'll create another option of how to make it, because this pink one needs us to work in great big long rows of hundreds of stitches, and I know that some people are not a fan of that, which is absolutely fine. So in the pattern I have also included a version that you can do in shorter rows. You still work the same amount of stitches, but in a slightly less per row way. So both of these constructions are included within the written pattern, and in the description below you'll find the link for if you want to read it on the blog or if you want to purchase the ad-free PDF. And it comes in adult sizes, extra small to 5XL. Also in the description I'll link all of the materials that you're going to need, but we'll go through those now too. I chose for this newer version to use Amigo yarn from Hobie, which is a really lovely category 3 DK weight yarn, and we get 175 meters, that's 191 yards in 50 grams, so it's on the lighter side, and it comes in the most beautiful colors. And all the details for how much of this you'll need is in the description and in the pattern below as well. And then we're going to need for the long row version, you're going to need a 4.5mm crochet hook, just that one. And then for the shorter rows, you're going to need a 4.5mm hook and then a 4mm hook if you would like to make your ribbing slightly tighter. It's entirely up to you. Then you'll also need a pair of scissors, a needle for your ends, and a couple of stitch markers too. So go grab your supplies and let's get going. Now both versions of this use exactly the same main stitch pattern. It's just that the pink one here runs in this direction, so horizontally, and the creamer one here goes in vertical lines. So what we need to do is learn that main stitch pattern, and then we can add the cuffs on as you need to. Now the important thing now to know is that if you are making the pink version, this one begins and ends with single crochet stitches that then become your sleeve. So we'll talk about that in a second. But if you're making this version here that has the vertical rows, we actually make the whole of the scarf without the sleeve cuffs on, and then we add them on afterwards. So it's just a slightly different construction that is detailed within the pattern. So make sure you go and check, because you'll need the numbers also for the size that you're making. Now, as I said, the pink version works the sleeves and the body all in one go. So I'm just going to go do a teeny weeny sample here just to show you how the construction of that works. So we put a slip knot on the hook, and then the pattern will tell you to chain a certain amount, and some of those chains are going to be for your sleeve, and then some of those chains are going to be for your main body, and then the other part of the chain is going to be for the other sleeve. So we have 3 distinct sections in this great big long row that you're going to end up having. Now we're going to imagine that this is a great big long chain that's the length that you need for the size that you're making from the pattern. And then I'm just going to show you how we then work some shorter stitches for the sleeve and some bigger stitches for the main, and then some shorter again for the other sleeve. So I'm going to end up with 30 stitches here. So I'm going to do 10 single crochet, but these don't count for you at all. This is just to show you the construction of the thing. So there we have 10 single crochet stitches, and that's going to represent my first sleeve. And then we start working half double crochet stitches, so these taller stitches, and they go in for your body section. So for me, I'm working 10, but you will work significantly more than that. Then when you've worked the portion for the body stitches, we're then going to work the next sleeve, which then goes back to our single crochet stitches. So the remaining chains will get a single crochet into them. Then when you've done your first row, what I'd encourage you to do is grab 2 stitch markers and put them in at the point where your sleeve ends, so that you can always figure out when you're coming back to it which is your first and last stitch of the main body. So there's one there. Let me grab this second one here. And so working back from here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. But obviously yours will be an awful lot bigger than that. So we have our 3 distinct sections. We have our sleeve, main body and our second sleeve. And then all we need to do is follow the pattern by turning our work. So turn after each row. And then for each sleeve, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work a single crochet in the back loop only of each of these stitches. And then when we get to where our stitch marker is, we are then going to start working into our set main body pattern, which I will show you separately in a moment because that applies for whichever version that you are doing. But what I will do here is just work some half double crochet stitches. And then when you've filled up that main body section, we get back to the shorter stitches for the second sleeve, and then we work single crochet in the back loop only of each of those. And each row then carries on in that same way. Once you turn, you work single crochet in the back loop only of each of your sleeve stitches. Then you follow the main body set pattern for the middle section, and then the other sleeve gets the single crochet in the back loop only. So that is just to give you an idea of the construction if you are going to be doing these very, very long horizontal rows that you see in the pink version that I made. So now you know a bit about the construction of that one. Let's look at the main stitch pattern, which will apply to this center panel that we have here, and also the main center panel of the other version that we have. Now, whichever version you're making, we're going to need to know how to do this main set pattern in the middle. So that's either going to be, as I've just shown you, in the center of your 2 sleeves, if you're going back and forth in long, long rows, or it's going to be the actual main body of the sweater scarf that we're going to work in a long, long, long rectangle and then add the sleeves onto afterwards. Now, if you're working the pink version in the pictures that has long rows, you are going to have your single crochets, your half double crochets in a multiple of 3, and then your single crochets. And those half double crochets are what we are going to be working into for this set pattern. So I'll just work a small swatch here now, but the pattern does include details for how many stitches you will need as a multiple of 3 for each of the different sizes. So to begin, we're going to put a slip knot on the hook, and then we're going to chain 2. Then we're going to yarn over, and we're going to find the back bump of that first chain that we made, and into that we are going to yarn over and pull through. Then we yarn over and we pull through just 1, and then we yarn over and we pull through all 3, and that's our first stitch made, our first foundation half double crochet. So then the next one we need to yarn over, and then we're going to go into this place here where that chain 1 was made, and we're going to get our hook under and make sure that we have 2 loops across it there. Yarn over and pull through, then we yarn over and we pull through 1, and that makes a chain for our next one to go into. Then we yarn over and we pull through all 3. We repeat that, yarn over, go into that chain that we made, making sure that we have both loops across here. We yarn over and pull through, yarn over, pull through 1, and yarn over and pull through all 3. So that's 3 stitches that we've made. Now I'm going to carry on and work a few here, so a multiple of 3, so that I can then show you this main stitch pattern that we have. But you work the number that you need for the size that you're making. Okay, so when you've got the number of stitches that you need, we are going to turn. And if you're working in the long rows, you will have worked your single crochet stitches in the back loop up until we get to this point. and then we chain 1, and now we need to start working our main set pattern, and this uses all of the loops of our stitch here. So the half double crochet has 3 loops to choose from. When we're working in rows, we have the back loop, that's this one furthest away from us. We have the front loop, which is the one just here at the front, and then we have the third loop, which is the extra loop that is further down here, the one facing you first of all when you look at the stitch. And what we need to do is work those in a sequence. So we're going to begin with the back loop for that first stitch, and we put a half double crochet in there. Then we go to the front loop of the next stitch and do a half double crochet there, and then we go to the third loop of the next stitch, and that one gets a half double crochet. Now we just repeat that sequence all the way across. We're going to go in the back loop of the next one, the front loop of the next one, and then the third loop of the next one. So just 3 to remember there. We go back, front, and then third. So repeat that all the way across. And then depending on which version you're making, you might have your single crochets to work into after you've done this, or you might be ready, just as I am now, just to turn and start your next row. So we turn, and our next row, row 3, is going to chain 1, and then we're just going to work into the back loops only of each of these stitches across. So every odd row now, so 3, 5, 7, etc., etc., is going to be the same as this. We're going to work into the back loop only of each of the stitches across. And now when working in the shorter rows, it's entirely up to you, but this last stitch, I like to put it through the whole of the stitch rather than the back loop, because I find it's slightly neater on your ends to do it that way. Then we're ready to turn, and for row 4, it's going to be very similar to row 2, but we're just going to shuffle the sequence along one. So rather than starting in the back loop, we're going to start in the front loop here. So we do front loop, then the third loop, and then the back loop. We have the front loop, then the third loop of the next one, and then the back loop. Oh, missed. Just repeat that all the way across. Then when we've done that row, we come to one of our odd rows. So we know that that's going to be a half double crochet in the back loop only. Then we're ready to turn, and row 6 is the final row that we need to know that's different. And we're going to chain 1, and we're starting the sequence in a different place again. We're going to begin with the third loop here. So we go third loop, then we go back loop, and then the front loop. So our third loop, back loop here, and then the front loop. So work that all the way along, and then that is the sequence you need to know. The next row is an odd row, and so it's going to be a half double crochet in the back loop only. So then that repeats for as many rows as the pattern tells you, and once you have completed all of those rows, whichever version you're making, come back to me and I'll show you what we do next. So if you're making the version in the long rows, once you have completed all of the rows, you are ready to then just to seam your sleeves. Now these were seamed many years ago, so I can't undo them to show you, but this basically is the join where we have your first and your last row, and they are just seamed together. Now I crocheted these together from the wrong side facing, but you can sew them together using a whip stitch or a mattress stitch, whatever you would like to do as your seaming method. And if you carry on watching, I'm actually going to show you how to seam, because we seam the other version in exactly the same way. So if you want a video tutorial on how to do that seaming in detail, then carry on watching and I will show you once we've added the sleeves to the other version. So if you're making the vertical construction, once you've completed the amount of rows that you need for the main body of the sweater scarf, we are now ready to add the join as you go sleeves on. Now the first sleeve here, we can carry on using this exact same yarn and work it into the side of our sweater scarf here. But what we need to do, what I recommend you do, is change down a hook size. So I'm going from a 4.5 down to a 4mm crochet hook. Now you don't have to do this, you have slightly wider and looser cuffs if you don't, but I found it gave a much neater and nicer finish to the finished cuff. So I've turned to the right side facing, and what we're now going to do is this join as you go cuff along. Now in the pattern, the recommended length for all the sleeves, sleeve forearm length is 47 stitches. So what you can do now is you can jiggle that number about to suit you and how you would like it to be. So for my size, I'm going to do 47 stitches as described in the pattern. And the way that we then do that is that we chain out 48. So always do one more than the amount of stitches that you need. So rather than show you the whole of the 47 stitches now, I'm just going to show you a portion just so that you get the idea of how we go back and forth into the ends of these rows to join. So chain out however many it is that you need for the length of sleeve that you would like to make, bearing in mind this will begin at around your elbow and can go down to your wherever you can have them long and long enough to turn back if you like. But don't worry, this is not how long mine will be. This is just so that I can show you here. So once you've got the length of chain that you need, we're now going to work back into the back bumps of these. The second chain from the hook, we're going to work a single crochet in it, and then into each of the stitches along, each of the chains along, sorry. All of those back bumps get a single crochet in them. Now the first time we get back to the beginning again, we're already attached to this first stitch here, and so what we're now going to do is slip stitch into the next stitch along. And then once you've done that, you can turn, and then we're going to work a single crochet in the back loop only of each of the stitches across. Now once we get back to the main body, we are going to slip stitch in the next 2 stitches here, and then we're going to turn, and then we're going to work a not a half double crochet, I've got it on the brain. We're going to work a single crochet in the back loop only of each of these stitches across. And then for the last stitch, it's entirely up to you, but I like to work through the whole of the stitch on the last stitch because otherwise the cuffs tend to get a bit loose over time. So then we turn, and bearing in mind yours is going to be much longer than this, we then chain 1, then we go into the back loop only of all of the single crochet that you have up until we meet with the main body again. And now here we are. And what we're going to do now is with this one we slip stitched into 2, but now we're going to slip stitch into this next stitch. We're going to skip this one, and then we're going to slip stitch into the next one. So we're going to work over 3 stitches there, but just slip stitch twice. Then we turn and we're ready to carry on working a single crochet in the back loop only. And that's all there is to it, to adding this rib. Now if you want to, you can change how tight it is or how loose it is, and that's easy to do in that you just slip stitch in more or less as you join, as you go. Obviously the more you slip stitch in, the tighter it will become. But if you wanted to, you could switch back to the 4.5mm hook or the larger hook that you're using if you wanted it to be looser. But obviously we need to cinch down because your forearm will be significantly smaller than this. So this is how we will end up joining it. If you want a really loose cuff, then no problem at all. Go with it in straight. But if you want to cinch it in like I'm going to, then join as I have recommended in the pattern. So work all the way along, joining as you go up until you get to here, and then meet me back and I'll show you how we seam it together. Once you've completed your sleeve cuff, then we now need to join the two sides of it together. Now I finished here with my wrong side facing me, and that's where we want to do this seam. I'm going to encourage you to crochet your seam together. And what we'll need to do at this point is to put it on, make sure you're happy with the fit, and then seam the whole length of the sleeve. And I'm actually going to seam a little bit more into, I put a stitch marker here where I'd like it to go to, into the actual sleeve, sorry, because that's the shaping that I would like. But you don't have to do that. You can seam for just the sleeve. You can seam for as much of this or as little of it as you like. And the way that we're going to seam it is with a slip stitch. We're just going to slip stitch together, stitch for stitch here. So I'm going to go into this side here, and then I'm going to pop across to the stitch I'm already in. And then I'm going to pull through both of those with a slip stitch. And then we work into the next one and the corresponding one there. So each stitch gets a slip stitch to join it together. Now, if you prefer not to crochet your seams together, then no problem at all. You can sew this together. You can use a whip stitch. You can use a mattress stitch. You can use whatever you would like to seam this together. But when I have actual stitches that need a seam, I always like to crochet them because it's quick and it's easy. And if you're using slip stitches, it creates a really nice, neat seam. So work away, joining all of your stitches to the point that you would like them to be. And then when you come to here, we obviously don't have stitches to join together. You just have sides of rows. So you can just slip stitch across with corresponding rows here, remembering that they're the height of a half double crochet. So you might need 3 slip stitches for every 2 rows, just so it doesn't pull and pucker there. So get to this point and I'll just show you quickly how I do that. So here I've come to the end of the sleeve cuff, and now I have the sides of the rows. So I'm just going to really carefully make sure to join the correct side with the other side and make sure that I don't pull it and make it pucker. And as I say, I generally do 3 slip stitches for every 2 rows of half double crochet that I have. But don't worry too much about exactly where the stitch placement goes here, because you won't see it. Just make sure that your rows line up. Then when you're happy with the amount that you've seamed together, you can break your yarn and pull it through. And then we're going to be able to turn it to our right side facing, and that is that complete. Now, having done your first sleeve, you're now ready to add your second sleeve, and the way that we do that is exactly the same as we did the first one. So we need to slip stitch into that first stitch, and then you need to chain out the amount to match the number that you did for your first sleeve, and then you're going to work back along here into those back bumps and join as we did before, and then go back and forth, joining in the same rhythm that you did for the first sleeve. So complete that sleeve now as well, and then we'll seam it in exactly the same way as we did the first sleeve. Thank you so much for joining me. I really hope you've enjoyed making this sweater scarf with me. Now, if you make whichever version you make, come and find me and show me, because I love to see your makes. I want to know what beautiful colours you've chosen and how you wear it. I'm Hand Down Crochet all over social media. Wherever you'd expect to find me, I'll be there, and I can't wait to see you again soon.